Just a minute to put it on our Facebook page.
Yeah.
Okay, we are live. So good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those joining from the US. My name is Mariam Hamam. I'm the Community Engagement Officer at MACECE, and we are here to host a webinar as part of the 40th anniversary of MACECE. So as some of you may know, the Commission is celebrating the 40th anniversary this year, and we're doing so through a series of posts, testimonials, videos, and webinars. And this will be the first webinar for the anniversary, and hopefully not the last. And today's discussion will be about a very important topic to Morocco's current situation, which is multilingualism in Morocco and how Moroccans associate their identity to their language. And we have 3 Fulbrighters for the discussion, 2 current US scholars, and the moderator is a Fulbright alumnus. So I will yield the floor to Dr. Karim Bensoukas, and we'll start with introductions and then move on to the discussion. Dr. Karim.
Okay, thank you, Mariam. Hi, everyone, and happy anniversary to MACECE, an institution which is very dear to all of us. And let me welcome Dr. Carole Edwards, and Dr. Julie Dell-Jones, current Fulbrighters in Morocco. If my memory is right, Carole is based in Casablanca and Julie is based in Agadir.
The other way around.
It's the other way around. Okay, I'm starting on false information. All right, so you get it right. And the title of the webinar is Multilingualism in Morocco, How Moroccans Associate Their Identity to Their Language. So I generally try to, put the linguistic situation in Morocco in a nutshell as saying that what we generally have is some sort of diglossic situation, maybe triglossic for some, and a situation which also involves multilingualism. So generally the 2 terms, diglossia and multilingualism, are associated, and these are pretty much like the 2 terms that we use to describe the situation in Morocco. Now, multilingualism, are we talking about mother tongues or foreign languages? We're actually talking about both, because the language, like the native speakers are speakers of 2 different languages. I refer to them as Moroccan Amazigh and Moroccan Arabic. These are the native languages, of course, that Moroccans speak. But we also have, given the official status of Standard Arabic, we also have Standard Arabic as a school language. It's an official language used in government, it's used in various sectors, etc. But we also have a number of foreign languages, predominantly French. Now English is creeping in. We also have some German, Italian, etc. So the situation is not that simple. Although the number of languages is actually limited, still the issues that we have are, we do have various issues. So we'll probably proceed by the order in which the names of the scholars are given to me, and I'll give the floor to Carole to deliver her presentation. Maybe I'll ask a couple of questions here or there if you allow me to interrupt, and probably direct the discussion in a certain direction, or else we can just like do it in a traditional way, and then we have the presentation delivered and we have some discussion, and then we move on to the second panelist, and then probably have a wrap up at the end. Is that okay with you? Okay. Perfect. So Carole, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So my name is Carole Edwards, and I like to make this distinction because I was born and raised in France, and I was educated in the United States, and I'm an American citizen, obviously, but I have a double identity myself. And my dad was born in Casablanca.
Okay, so welcome, Carole.
So that confuses a lot of people, and it's been an interesting, not a tug of war, but an interesting dance here, because if I start speaking in French, they get very confused whether, you know, how can I be a Fulbright scholar because my French is just perfect. And so, you know, some colleagues introduced me as a French girl, and I was like, no, you're supposed to say I'm American. So I'm in the heart of an identity crisis because of my multilingualistic background. But what I will base my comments on right now is my experience since I've arrived. And I was fortunate to teach at ESEF in the fall, which is the École de Formation. So basically, you know, training school for future teachers. And my course was in English, obviously, and I realized that, yes, it is the identity of Moroccan Arabic and Moroccan Amazigh, but maybe a lot more than that, because even in the Amazigh, you know, I was very intrigued and I did a little bit of research, and I met people that were from the Rif, where the Amazigh was completely different than the Souss, the people from the Souss. So I was just really exploring the different variations, even in the Amazigh language. And also had some colleagues who had teenagers in school that were just laboring over the Arabic imposed classes that they were dragging, especially around the exam period. So it gives me a clear idea of, you know, the different languages in country, and that not contentious, but that love-hate relationship with the French at times because of the historical background. So yes, to communicate, the French was the lifesaver, but looking towards the future and for professional openings, also think that this new generation of Moroccans are really thinking that English is going to be the key to opening doors to professional opportunities and studies. I mean, I had many students asking me about graduate programs and other options. So this revealed to me how smart people were and how fast they were adapting and being so self-assertive. I was able to compare the students in my hometown to students here, and I was just in awe all the time of how well-rounded students were and how they were able to be eloquent in English and full of ideas. I mean, I would give one topic and so many people had a plethora of ways of approaching it, and that was exciting. And everything was really tied to an approach to the language and the relationship they had entertained within that language. Now, I must also say and add that each had their regional, I don't want to say specificity, but heritage. And I had students from Laayoune, I had students from Rabat. And during an entire semester, I was teaching to a class full of diversity, but nobody ever raised this as an issue or a reason for enhancing a particular facet of who they are. It is who they are. They don't need to ponder, they don't need to pontificate, they don't need to talk about diversity and make statements, because they live it day in and day out through regionalisms, through language, and really, it's to me, it was an exemplar of a huge success, and English has its place now, definitely. So that's my 2 cents on the question. Julie, would you like to?
Yeah, so thank you. That was really interesting, Carole. And you know, your comments about, you know, the diversity of students just reminded me of a couple weeks ago. I was fortunate enough to take a little trip with former students and visit a former student whose family lives in Fenidec, which is just next to Ceuta, the Spanish enclave. And because my Darija is not as developed, and I don't speak Fusha, the standard Arabic, I actually was able to communicate with her mother in Spanish. So our language of communication was Spanish, which was something that I hadn't, you know, I can speak somewhat fluently. I'm quite rusty, but I was able to communicate with her mother. But normally, because I live in Casablanca, generally I'm able to use French as a language of communication, just you know, for my daily routine. However, I am a teacher of English as a additional language. In the United States, we say English as a second language, with this sort of monolingual assumption that that most people only speak one language, while we all know that that is in fact not the norm in most places in the world. I've gravitated towards the phrase monolingualism. There's a cure for monolingualism, right? And as a teacher of languages, and as a teacher who educates future teachers, doing language teacher training, that is sort of a motto that I always like to share with my within the American context. In Morocco, I was drawn to Morocco specifically because of the diverse linguistic landscape here. I had visited Morocco early 2000s multiple times, but I was on short visits around 2001, and then, you know, for a number of years after that, mainly going to tourist areas, Marrakesh, etc. I had never actually visited Casablanca until I moved here in 2019 for the Fulbright. But I was able to communicate in French because it was quite a necessity at that time. Despite that, you know, some tourist areas also having people speaking other languages, English, German, etc., it was really French dominated. But I have found since coming back here that there has been quite a shift towards English. And this is, of course, not just in the discussion of policy in terms of language policy in the education system, but in just what I see in daily life, what I see in my interactions. Because I speak French, I do have an accent when I speak French, so it's after, you know, it's quite clear that I'm not a French person, unlike Carole. But I'm often I'm often surprised by people who say, no, don't speak to me in French, speak to me in English. Now, my French is not that bad that it's not comprehensible, of course, but it's an indication that their choice is a definite preference for communicating in English over French. Now, there are multiple reasons for that. Sometimes the person is actually not as fluent in French as I had, assumed. And other times it is a ideological, political, identity-related choice that they are making in their shift away from French towards English, which, if looking at the history of Morocco, has connotations and connections with the colonial past, and therefore oftentimes has some negative connotations. Perhaps, we'll get into that as the discussion progresses, but just in this introduction of myself, I teach English as a second language or as a foreign language, and as an additional language. And I like to think of English in terms of world Englishes, that there are different varieties of English. I like to combat the idea of a hierarchy and think of English as not the language of particular nations, but the language of the new lingua franca, the language of mutual communication, where the native language is, there could be multiple native languages. And so I try and take this approach of sort of a super diversity English, where even in the United States, we're not teaching foreign languages like Spanish, for example, as a comparison, as a foreign language, but as a language that exists in different contexts in the landscape of the United States. And likewise, I would say that English exists as a language throughout various different landscapes for different purposes, and therefore belongs to the world and not particular nations that are, the United States, Australia, the UK, etc. So that's me. So the discussion of English, learning English, and a turn towards English is something that I'm very interested in, since that is my profession, and specifically here in Morocco, with the very diverse linguistic landscape. I find it very interesting to learn about how people are using language as a way of expressing their identity and their choices and their future directions.
I think we've just listened to very important points, and I'd like to probably just express in some additional points, and I would like both Julie and Carole to react to them. And I could see some parallels, because Carole is based in Agadir, right? And that's as if so that would be Abdurrahman Msidder, who is the head. Okay, and you would have like Mjid Redwan and Redwan Madawi as colleagues, right?
Yes, all this wonderful team. Monsieur Msidder is a gem.
Yeah, and he's specialized in French communications, so you can just practice as much French as you want there.
Okay. He doesn't speak English.
Yeah, so the parallel I could see is you mentioned Tashhit and Tarifit, and then you said that you had a class which is very like inclusive in a sense. And they also mentioned students from Rabat and students from Laayoune. Could you please just show us how these students kind of handle this language diversity in terms of their everyday communication?
Well, first of all, I didn't realize the diversity of my class until the very last week, because they each brought me a gift from their region. I had no idea, because our means of communication was English. So everybody played the game, and there was they talk about personal stories, or I could see more differences in their socioeconomic backgrounds. I could see that I had some students who were struggling, and I knew it from day one. And so, I made it a point to bring goodies for everyone, because I knew some people really needed it. And it was, that's the first thing that struck me. Some were in dire straits, really. Mm-hmm. But nobody ever made a case out of it. I mean, I had 2 or 3 students that couldn't do presentations because they didn't have a laptop. So we worked out different ways around it. And so it was more multicultural, linked to, yes, to socioeconomic and different classes. But as far as the linguistics and the differences and the regionalism and so on and so forth, I had no idea, because everything was conducted in English, and no one ever made it a burden, if I can say. It was really exciting for them to share some of their cultural backgrounds at the end, rather than throughout the class, which I thought was very interesting. I mean, I spearheaded a diversity project at Texas Tech, where I'm a professor. And I mean, we just went on and on and on and on. And it just struck me that I just lived the most incredible diversity experience without trying to just word it. It was such a gratifying moment, really. But that didn't mean that we were melting all together, but it was just everybody respected each other's ideas. There was never, I mean, I could see the outfits were different. So I could see somebody was Sahrawit rather than a mariachi, or, I mean, I could definitely see, but although I was quite ignorant about it, but, I spent a lot of time in Agadir talking to people in other areas than Sonaba. I mean, I love walking through Salam, Aruda, and just different areas so that I could get to know people, and that's talking to people that I understood a lot of things, and I started to build on my very poor Darija too. I should have taken, steady classes. So that was, I really regretted it. But so in that sense, it was a gradual process, but it was the election for each and every one to just share their experience without making an issue out of it, just weaving gradually here and there, things. And like they taught me about some regional musics, about instruments and music from the north, and they would make me listen to little pieces. Or I created a closed Facebook group too, so we would post things for each other so that I could learn. I mean, I learned so much from them. I know they learned from me, but the exchange was incredible. And through them, and then they would correct my Darija, and they would say, "Oh my God, you've really, really improved. Can you imagine when you first showed up, you said shukran, and now you're shukran." I mean, there was like little things like this that made me feel, you know, really, really close to them. So there was a true exchange. And yes, we did it through learning English as a second language or a third or a fourth, but through those just very subtle exchanges of, well, you know, here, this is definitely, you know, we don't have gender studies. But then they're open about anything. They want to talk with you about anything, and there's no fear, there's no taboos. It's I mean, I do come from a university in Texas where I really am fearful of teaching conversation because nobody wants to talk. Everybody's scared about, you know, offending the neighbor. And it's just, I have to say, it was very refreshing that they had this safe zone in my classroom where they could just, you know, really share, and they were very eager to share everything with me. So yes, through English, very subtly, I became acquainted not only with the culture, but with their little, you know, differences, yeah, the different landscapes, as Julie said, that they were very important and became very apparent to me. And so it really got me thinking, you know, why, if we're writing diversity statements, but we're not really applying it day in and day out, or we're not seeing a direct application, maybe we should start rethinking the learning together. It was just really thought-provoking for me. It was just a wonderful experience.
Yeah, Carole, I was also thinking about, like, if people are not quite aware of the linguistic differences between Tarifit and Tashahit, which kind of are very remote, geographically speaking. So we're talking about like 800 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers away. So from Agadir to Nador, for example, that's a long way off. And then the diversity is kind of large to the extent that if someone from Agadir who is not familiar with Tarifit will find it difficult to understand most of what is said in Tarifit. Now, the other thing is also the same thing is related to like people from Rabat and people from the Ayun. So people in Rabat would speak Moroccan Arabic as Julie would speak it probably, but then people from the Ayun speak a variety of Arabic, which is called Hassaniya. And they also tend not to be very easily comprehensible to different speakers. So I'm kind of intrigued. I mean, like when they're not speaking in English, I'm not sure you paid attention to this. How do they manage this linguistic and subcultural diversity that they have amongst themselves?
Well, I think they were breaking up. I mean, they were always, within their little group of friends. And I just wondered, are these girlfriends they made, at school, or were these people that they were friends with who were also studying with them here? But you're right. Now, if I knew these languages, I could tell you who was speaking what. But, the second they saw me, it was English, English, English. We never spoke French, ever. Now you reminded me, because outside of the ESEF classroom, it was an undergraduate group. I gave a workshop at the Faculté des Lettres et Sciences Humaines it was in English, and it was in my background because I've written a lot about West Indian storytelling. So I gave a workshop to doctoral students on the passage from orality to literature. And most of the people who attended were from the MACECE department, which was very interesting because in Arabic or in MACECE, poetry and oral tradition was transmitted and is still transmitted orally. And so I gave him a lot of theoretical tool, you know, of study and working on dissertation, MA thesis, projects on, you know, how they can make that orality become be safeguarded. And it was very interesting because this department is fairly new. It was built in, it opened in 2009. And so I told them, you have a huge responsibility here. And there's already 360 graduate students, which is enormous. And I said, you know, this is now your task.
Okay.
You have a huge job.
Carole, can I just like add in some information about the departments of Amazigh in Morocco? There are only 3. One in Agadir, one in Fez, and one in Oujda, but they opened a new one in Casablanca too. As far as the master's programs are concerned, there's only one in Agadir. And I guess that Abdelali Talmansour is the person in charge, I guess, if he's still the person in charge. And they have another master's program in Fez. We used to have one in Rabat, but we couldn't have the re-accreditation accepted. So yeah, we don't have as many Amazigh departments in Morocco, for example, as French or English departments. So the foreign language departments outnumber those of Amazigh. That's the idea I wanted to add.
Yes, and they're doing a great job. I've been working with Taleb Zizawi on trying to help me out, kind of deciphering an author I'm working on called Mohamed Nedali, who's a novelist. And every time he is interviewed or he's on TV, he always ends up his interview or his talk with a poem in Amazigh, because that's his native tongue. And in his novels in French, there are so many layers of expressions and you know, idioms that belong to the Amazigh culture. So I've been, you know, in fact, there's a conference coming up the 28th, 29th, and 30th of June, celebrating Amazigh cultures and how they're interwoven into literature and how they can be part of education in Morocco. So I'm definitely going to attend.
And Zizawi himself is from?
He's from the north.
Exactly, he speaks Tawhid. Okay.
You're trying to trick me there.
Yeah, I know most of the people down there. So yeah, well, just.
He's wonderful. They've been very helpful.
Yeah. Can I just move on to Julie, and then I'd like just to draw your attention to something similar, Julie, because you're based in Casablanca, and then your trip to Fnidak. Have you noticed the differences in Moroccan Arabic?
I'm not as advanced to notice those differences. So no, I am by no means anywhere near the level where I would be able to distinguish the differences. I am at the level where I can tell the difference between Arabic and the Tamazight languages. Usually, I have a friend who speaks Tamazight from south of Fez, and I know when he's talking to his family, because I always hear that there seems to be a prevalence of this sound. So that's how I can sort of distinguish the languages. But unfortunately, I don't have that level of mastery of either language, either on the Darija or Arabic, standard Arabic, or any of the Tamazight languages. I would say, though, that, Carole, when you were talking about, the diversity of your students, when I was in Rabat, I was teaching a course in English But I was interested in what the students would like to research, and they were, briefly describing their potential research proposals. And a number of students, were very interested in studying Amazigh language and the policy and how, and people's attitude towards the Amazigh language in the school system. And and I thought that was a really positive sign, because the people, the few students that I had in this particular group, and those who were interested in Amazigh culture and languages, were very proud of this particular side of their identity, either half their identity or their full identity, as they self-describe them themselves. And I think that is a real change from what, in the post-colonial and even during the colonial period, when there was a real kind of a difference and a sort of a looking down upon, the rural languages, or the non-Arabic language that doesn't have any kind of prestige. And I think that although there is still a lot of hurdles, in terms of the orthography and having the textbooks, to teach the language, and having the teachers who are well versed enough and prolific enough to be able to not just teach, but also to create materials. Despite those challenges, I really see that as a positive move. At the same time that I see that positive association and that eagerness to study this by students who are at the university, I also still see a bit of negativity, in terms of why are we imposing an additional language, when, and not just an additional language in terms of learning how to speak, but also a language that has its own, writing, orthography, its own lettering, and the controversy, with that, with taking an oral language and then kind of choosing, deciding upon, how that was going to be documented and into a written language that can more easily be taught. Also, the author that you mentioned, I'd actually like to get a bit more information about that and look into that, because, with what you said, that this is an author that really navigates, the multiple languages, and I really enjoy that that idea of this plurilingual identity and really mixing the languages, rather than contextualizing, oh, this is where we speak French, and this is where we speak Darija, and this is where we speak, standard Arabic or Fusha, or this is where we speak English, right? Really creating a much more lifelike, dynamic intermingling of these languages that really reflects more of how, especially young people, but also older generations as well, in terms of Arabic and French, and also Tamazight, but that really reflects their full identity without compartmentalizing each. As you were saying, Fusha, Darija, Moroccan Arabic, is mixed with, words from Tamazight, French, and that is really a sort of a more true identity. I'm not expert enough to have any real comments about using Moroccan Arabic in terms of the education system. Apparently they tried it and immediately, did away with that idea. I don't know if they really, gave it an honest chance. But in terms of a discussion about how people use the language, to reflect their identity, and how people interact and how people make choices, in terms of the language that they use. I think it's really interesting and really worthwhile to get away from that idea of the compartmentalizing languages and really look at this mixture of this new English, this new communication. English is very flexible, and so I hear English being interjected into conversations that mix French and Arabic. So I think that's an interesting movement that will probably continue in the future and have influence for beyond just the spoken language, but probably with the new generations that are influenced. I had a student at Benamsik University, and I was teaching in the English department, and she was learning Korean online. And I said, "Oh, Korean, that's fantastic. Why are you learning Korean? What's your connection?" And she says, "Oh, well, I really like K-pop and BTS, and it's just this sort of this digitally or computer mediated super diversity where we're not just influenced geographically by the proximity of Spain to the north, or the historical influence of French and with France during the colonial period, but this diversity that is influenced now by TikTok, by Instagram, by Facebook, by YouTube. A fellow colleague of ours, Carole, I don't know if you met Katie, who speaks Tashalit, right? So, she learned it in the United States for the most part, and I have a colleague who is learning it online on YouTube. I follow Darija with Katie. Koftar is someone, I believe she's in Fez, and she's teaching Darija online. She's doing a fantastic job, just trying to create her own niche, and I think this globalization beyond the economy, but a real globalization of being influenced by so much social media and this real directness of in the example of the K-pop, or example of learning Darija online, or learning Tamazight online, is really changing this conversation beyond what are we going to teach in schools. And so I hate to it's funny when policymakers try to control or manage the language choices, and I feel like it's really not in their control anymore, right? A lot of these choices are beyond their control, and probably beyond what they could expect, but it is changing, and I find that to be a really interesting conversation, where language mixture is really dynamic and reflective of the mixture in society and what influences us.
I would like to, before we move on to the next point, because you mentioned one of the points that was brought up in the questions, and someone asked, to which extent do you think can language policies affect individual linguistic choices? So if you'd like to talk about that.
I think language policy will have less and less of an importance when people are being educated online, when language is moving faster than than what the policy can dictate or can control or manage. Yeah, I think the policy with the issue of Tamazight being taught, I actually support that as someone who is very pro plurilingualism and really understands the importance of learning content in your first language and not having barriers to education already from such a young age. I think that is extremely important. I know that there's a lot of pushback in the primary levels for teaching Tamazight. However, I think the outcome far outweighs whatever challenges there are. And I think especially at the primary level, the idea of education only being a means to job security, I think is unfortunate. I think that when you are able to learn your language or the language of your grandparents and take pride in that language, only then can you take pride in yourself and really understand your identity. And that reminds me of the Chicano writer Gloria Anzaldúa, who really expresses this need for mixing the languages, and she writes in mixing Spanish and Chicano expressions and English without translations, right? Because why should she force translations on someone instead of having them make the effort to understand her? So yeah, I think this the issue of identity and language in the early ages, the policy is important to have to offer choices, but in the later ages, when people are exposed to different cultures and languages on their own, either online or through interactions, even in the most remote places. I was telling you earlier that I was somewhere that was fairly remote, far away from any paved roads. I came across two little boys, one on a donkey, and they were tending a herd of sheep. And one of them, I was trying to communicate in French and what little Darija words that I knew. And he asks if I spoke English. And so I think this, I don't know, 9 or 10-year-old boy, this one example is sort of indicative of a larger trend where even when you think you are, far away from the tourist area, or you are, I don't want to say the middle of nowhere, because I was definitely somewhere very beautiful, but far removed from most major roads. Even there, people are learning English and choosing to communicate in English. And I think that was, for me, a very telling experience in terms of the trend towards English and away from French. A few minutes later, after I was speaking with this young boy, I don't know, someone who possibly was his grandfather, or definitely at least 2 generations older, came by on a donkey, and I couldn't understand, exactly what he was saying, but I heard French, right, in Darija, and so I assumed he was asking if I spoke French, as if, can I help this person perhaps if he spoke French, and the little boy says no, English. And so the old man just kind of keeps on walking with the on the donkey. And so this really was sort of a generational difference, where the old man was, wondering if I spoke French, and possibly he spoke French as well. But no, I was communicating in English with this 9 or 10-year-old little boy on this very rocky dirt road.
I'd like to say something about the policy changes. If you look at certain models that have been a success and others that have failed, for instance, in the West Indies, Creole used to be prohibited. It was shameful to speak Creole. It was the oral language. And then slowly now, it's become glorified, but people still write in French because there's no audience to read, books in Creole, really. If we focus back on the Maghreb, look at what happened to Algeria, where the policies were a little too hasty. And so the population was kind of lost overnight. French was, the only place where French was really the language of instruction was the Faculty of Medicine. And I have a friend who's at the University of Madison, Wisconsin, who has really focused on this particular topic, and has called it les analphabètes trilingues, because people were lost. So I think the whole thing about the language policy, it has to be a process. It also has to be take into consideration other factors, because I agree with everything Julie has said about celebrating learning Tamazight and variation of Darija. But at the end of the day, it's also important to have a solid structure, and for those policies not to keep on changing constantly.
Yes.
There needs to be some consistency, otherwise people are kind of off balance. So structure, I think, is extremely important, and consistency as far as that policy goes. I don't know if you wanted to say something related to that, Karim, because
yes, yeah, well, that definitely is the case. You don't want to have hasty changes, as you call them, and you don't want them when you have more than one language. That ends up confusing people. And as one of you mentioned earlier, some people kind of find it very difficult to handle 3 different languages in the school system with 3 different writing systems. And probably the writing systems, some start from left to right, some start from right to left. That's kind of confusing. And then we need to make choices, and the choices have to be well thought, so don't have people, as you said, off balance. What I'd like to probably suggest is going back to the policy, and I like the idea made by Julie that no matter what the language policy is, the choices are motivated by the technology we have now, social media, and as you said, there is someone who's teaching Moroccan Arabic, and she has that niche in there, which is really interesting. Still, when it comes to Morocco, the introduction of Tamazight, I'm insisting on calling it Tamazight, because when you say Tamazight, you actually refer to one of the varieties. That's the one of the center. So yeah, when we talk about Tamazight, it is actually becoming, it has become, and it is becoming further and further a language of school. The balance that we need to strike is, for example, democratically, if Tamazight is introduced to the school, what is the deal with Moroccan Arabic? If we start from the premise that Tamazight is a native language in Morocco, and the other language is Moroccan Arabic. So we end up now in the system, the educational system, we end up with a lack of a balance between, Amazigh, which is kind of, it's a standard variety, but still you feel like it's closer to the regional varieties in a sense, because the approach that has been adopted was, or has been, to introduce something that is not very far from what people speak. So it's the same structure enriched with vocabulary, specifically technical terminology. So the basic structure remains the same. The sound structure pretty much remains the same, unlike what we have in Arabic. So if you compare like Moroccan Arabic and Standard Arabic, the gap is really, really wide. And what is happening sociolinguistically in Morocco, if you remember at the beginning, I said people would go with a diglossic situation. Other people would say it's not just diglossic, it's triglossic. And then we have that variety in the middle, which is halfway between Standard Arabic and Moroccan Arabic, which some educated people use to get closer to the population. And some teachers also use it in classes so that they bridge that gap between the two varieties that are in a diglossic situation. So my point is, to what extent do we really have a justice in the educational system? We do have language policy, but language policy is taking one direction. It is promoting Amazigh, but it is not openly, overtly promoting Moroccan Arabic, because the official language that we already have is Standard Arabic. So as long as Standard Arabic is the official language, there is no way technically we can have Moroccan Arabic in our language policy, like take the place of the school language or something like that. So I'm not sure what your ideas are about this point.
Well, Moroccan Arabic is the language spoken at home, right? So I'm thinking that you'd have to put the tradition in the school system. You'd have to create a mini revolution. It's the French girl in me speaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there is another little detail that escapes most of the people, because knowing the educational system in Morocco, what happens mostly in classrooms, like the ones like Arabic, Standard Arabic classes, or subjects in which Arabic is used as a means of instruction. What happens is that most people would switch to Moroccan Arabic. So Moroccan Arabic would be predominant to a large extent. And then what stays like standard is more like the terminology, etc. So we end up having pretty much like the same situation as MSA, but it is there, not de jure, it is there de facto. But that then would override the teaching of Amazigh, because the teaching of Amazigh is limited to 3 hours a week, and that's generally within a language class. It's like the teaching of French or the teaching of Arabic or the teaching of Spanish, for example. Whereas the other subjects, I'm talking here about the public educational system, the other subjects tend to be taught in Arabic. So there is always this, overwhelming presence of Standard Arabic de jure. But then what happens de facto is an overwhelming presence of Moroccan Arabic. And that kind of plays against the official language policy, in addition to whatever we have in social media and TikTok and Instagram and things like that. So I always say, I had this comment from one of my colleagues who said, we only have like a few languages, why would we call it a very complicated story? And then I said, yeah, although we have a very limited number of languages, what makes it a complicated story is the issues that are involved.
So in the same line of reasoning, one of the questions we have received is about the theory of translanguaging, which is the natural behavior of multilinguals to communicate in the language most appropriate to the situation. So in Morocco, for instance, we have people use French in academic or professional settings, even if it's two Moroccans speaking to each other who both speak Darija, or then switch to Moroccan if it's a more casual setting. So if you would like to speak to that phenomenon.
Well, it's interesting because I've seen clearly some of my colleagues love it when I speak a little bit of Darija to them, and others really don't. And I wondered why, but I think for some people, it's a level of status. And, you know, I'll go to the souk and I'll use my Darija and get my point across, and people's faces illuminate because they don't, you know, when they realize I'm Mashi tourist, right? But although, who knows? But like my students say, I couldn't say it in Chinese, they still, nobody would believe me. But some of my colleagues, I've just really had, I've just seen that it's just, they're never going to address me in Darija. It's never going to happen. Of course they speak it. I hear them speak amongst themselves, but to me, they'll never speak Darija. So I think it's also a level of education, and it's a level of appropriate situation, I'd say. So in a professional settings, depends who you deal with. Yes.
I was thinking that maybe this is also generational. That this may be, you know, changing. However, while that may be true in some cases, I know, you know, people who just recently graduated high school and they went to a French school, and I would meet them in the park, and I was trying to learn Darija. I would ask them, oh, how do you say this? How do you say that? And they would think, and then they would call someone else over, and they would have this discussion because they said, oh no, we just say it in French. And while that may be true for some, you know, specific, you know, vocabulary, for some specific words that you know, there's, you know, constant code switching and mingling of the languages. In this particular case, I got the impression that that they were not able to fully communicate in Darija because of their, you know, socioeconomic background and going to school, you know, going to a French language school and speaking French at home. They speak French with their parents. So it's hard to tell if this is a generational change where, you know, French is a little bit, you know, on the decline, perhaps, and English maybe on the incline. But I think that older generations still have that French status, but I think that that might be changing with younger generations.
I'm kind of aware of a couple of studies, Julie, by your colleagues from MACECE. The former vice dean, that would be Bouzia Mjid and Samir Al-Gibi. And one of the studies they conducted targeted the choice of English departments by high school graduates of sciences. And one of the hypotheses they are trying to put on the table is that their choice is partly motivated by their lack of mastery of the French language, which happens to be a common trait, a common characteristic of most of our students that go through the public system, as opposed to those who go through the private system, and as opposed to those who go through the French mission, French schools. So it looks to me like we do have those three different layers of French, with public schools being probably their students being the ones who score lowest, with the lowest level, And then private schools who are better off when it comes to their performance in French, as opposed to those who have gone through the French mission. Carole, I'm not sure you know Ahmed Al-Maqarri from Agadir. He's the guy in charge of the, he used to be in the French department in Dakhla. He was actually my French teacher, and then we had this conversation a few years back, and he said, when you were my student, we couldn't feel the difference between you guys. I was an English major. He said, we couldn't feel the difference see the difference between you guys in terms of French and the students of the French department themselves. Your level was pretty much the same. But that's something like 30 or 40 years ago. He says that, he said that at the time we had that conversation, things were completely different. I'm not sure. We also have like the French is on the decline, probably English on the incline, as you said. There's also the one thing that I noticed, at least in my institution, is that the Department of English tends to attract more students because the teachers are more sociable, more lenient, more generous with grading than the ones in the French system. The ones in the French system did not adapt to the decline in the educational system. They're still grading their students as if they were students from the 80s or something like that. With the large difference, of course, that, for example, myself, when I was a kid, I had to take French as a language, foreign language, but I also learned math, science, and chemistry and physics in French, which made my French way better than the French of the students that go currently through the system. So these guys still have the same level. La barre est trop haute, Carole. If you see what I mean. So one of the things that we noticed is that students would escape the English department and go to another department. English, because of its attractiveness. There's also the economical side of it. There's the MACECE program that are offered, the different majors. So all these things are aspects that our students negotiate in terms of their choices.
It's very interesting what you're saying, because one of the things that was very surprising to my students is when I was grading their essays, I actually handed a rubric with extensive corrections. And they say, we're not used to that. Usually it's a grade and we don't really know what we need to do to improve. And so they were just like, oh my God, we were just, yes, there is leniency, but there's structured, there's constructed feedback. And that apparently in other departments didn't take place. I will say though, that my colleagues in the French section especially have enormous classes, and they have to turn in grades really fast, and they have no TAs, and it's just an enormous amount of work. I mean, like to 150 to 200 students. And so this would explain, also the fast grading with, I mean, I had in ISF, I had 45 students, and to me, this was enormous. But when I saw the other classes, I was like, whoa. But it still took me a long time, but I wanted to give thorough feedback with a grading rubric.
Since we are talking about French being used in school, but also Darija, one of the questions we received is the gap between dialects in France is bigger than the gap between Darija and Standard Arabic. So if we were to adopt Darija as a language for school, which one would we adopt without discriminating against all others?
I'm sorry. They said that the gap between dialects in French?
In France is bigger than the gap between Arabic and Moroccan Darija. So if we were to adopt Darija, which one would we choose? You can also disagree with the notion that the gap is bigger in France.
a very complex question. I'm not sure I have the linguistic background to give a
certainly
proper
not in
answer.
Darija.
Can I venture? So the gap between Darija and Standard Arabic is huge. For the simple reason that although both are Hamitic languages, they are Semitic languages. Still, Darija has undergone enormous changes, and if you go like deep down, what you'll notice is a number of resemblances with the MACECE system. These are not clear like on the surface because of the lexical differences. So Moroccan Darija would sound more like Standard Arabic in terms of the lexicon. In terms of its phonology, for example, it's no different from Tamazight, for example, not Tashahit. In terms of syllable structure, I don't want to go technical, but the phonology of Shua, for example, Shua is the reduced vowel. Some people say that what happened in Moroccan Arabic is the long vowels got shortened and the short vowels got reduced to Shua, or they got lost completely. Still, even if we go with that hypothesis, even if we accept it, when we look at the current situation, when we look at the phonology of Shua, Shua never occurs in an open syllable in Moroccan Arabic. That's very, very unlikely, very, very unlikely. A syllable with Shua never attracts stress. I'm just giving you these two examples. Now, when you compare this phonology to that of Tamazight, which is closest to it, Tashahit is different because in Tashahit we do have like syllabic consonants. And then that makes it a little bit different even from Tamazight. Tarifit is a little bit complicated because of the loss of R's in coda positions. So what happens is that if you have an R which follows a nuclear vowel, the R disappears and there's a little change, like the vowel gets lengthened. If it's an I, it turns into a diphthong. If it's an E or an U, and things like that. But still, the majority of the phenomena that we have in terms of syllable structure are the same. Now, if you look, like, go deep into the structure, you'll find that the Tamazight, for example, in Moroccan Arabic do share the same system, the same prosodic system in terms of syllable structure and in terms of stress assignment. Of course, there are differences, but if you abstract away from these differences, what you see is that the same thing is happening. When you look at the syntax, there are plenty of cases that are the same. The reflexive, for example, nobody uses rasu, jabha frasu. In Arabic, in Standard Arabic, you would say, like, if someone takes their lives, qatala nafsahu. In the East, you have ruhu or something like that, but never rasu. We never use head, the term, the lexical term head, to refer to the reflexivity of the action. But that's exactly what we do in MACECE. And there are plenty of other things, So I don't want to go into all these details. Now, if Moroccan Arabic looks like this, then it is very much different from Standard Arabic. Look at the negation, majish. Majish in Standard Arabic, you don't have lam ya'ti shay'an. You don't have double negation. You don't have the post-verbal negator, lam ya'ti. Now, majish, you have the shay in there. Go to Tarifit, for example, you'll have something like wad yusisha, which is pretty much the same type of structure. And these are basically the two forms that have pre and post-verbal negation. Now, post-verbal negation is also becoming a characteristic of Tamazight. In the region of Khmiset, you do have that. You'll have some like urd yusisha or shad yusi. So that depends on the sha where it occurs, either closer to the verb or far away from it. But that's what you get in Moroccan Arabic, and that's what you get in Tarifit. That's what you get also in Taqbilit in Algeria, where you have Ursin Ghara with the double negation. And these are not related in any way to Standard Arabic. So when you look at these things, now technically what we call this is the yes person cycle. Why would it be that the yes person cycle is affecting Moroccan Arabic and it's sparing Standard Arabic? It doesn't make sense. And then is it that these two varieties have developed this aspect, at the same time? It's still a possibility. And it's because the two coexist. So my feeling is that when we abstract away from the lexical resemblances between Moroccan Arabic and Standard Arabic, the structural resemblances are very striking between Moroccan Arabic and Moroccan Amazigh. So they are, you know, the hypothesis that Standard Arabic and Moroccan Arabic are close is a very weak one. To the point that if I have a native speaker of Moroccan Arabic and I want them to learn Standard Arabic, the original or the mother tongue does not really help a lot in making the process easy. And it turns out that learning Standard Arabic is just as difficult to a native speaker of Moroccan Arabic as it is to a native speaker of Moroccan Amazigh. They both struggle. So the idea of like, having whatever in terms of the educational system or language policy, it's not the same. Standard Arabic is taught, and unfortunately, we don't want to say this probably for political reasons or whatever, political correctness. But as a language that we teach, you never teach kids a language which is native using pictures. When you show them the picture of a bottle, you're not telling them that this is a bottle as a concept, you're teaching them the word. When you show them a banana and you're telling them that's mawzatun, they know that's a banana anyway. So what you're telling them is the word, not the concept. Everybody knows what a banana looks like when they see one. What they learn is mawzatun, okay? And if you teach mawzatun to Moroccans, whether they have an Amazigh background or an Arabic background, or a bottle, qinninatun, or delwun for still, that's a pail, or whatever other thing you do, you're teaching them the same vocabulary item, which is just as weird to this guy or to the other guy, which means that, you know, it's a little bit complicated. As I said, it's not the number of languages, it's the detailed issues that are really, at stake. So assuming, for example, that if you speak in Moroccan Arabic, that will help students learn Standard I'm not a language teacher. I don't think that it helps. It will rather inhibit our students. And the more input our students get in class, the better their performance at a given language. And the way, unfortunately, the way Standard Arabic is taught in Morocco is that of a foreign language. And the argument I use is you never put two students with different linguistic backgrounds in the same classroom. And then the example I use is, if you go to the United States, would you go to school with Americans? And the answer is no. Why? Because English is very different from Arabic. So why would you put two people with different backgrounds in the same language school and still claim that one of the languages is closer to the other one? If you see my argument.
Thank you, Dr. Bensoukas, for the explanation. We have merely scratched the surface of a very complex situation in Morocco, and certainly in other countries that have the same phenomenon as we do. But I would like to thank you for participating in our webinar, and to thank the attendees for their time and their attention and their questions. It was a pleasure to listen to all of you, and I hope we get to do something like this in the future, maybe on another topic, or multilingualism as well. So thank you all for attending.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Thank you all.
Thank you. And
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure meeting finally, Carole, and thank you, Karim, Dr. Bensoukas. It was a pleasure meeting you. And
You can call me Karim. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Carole, and thank you, Miriam.
Thank you very much.
It's been a nice webinar.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.